I would argue that when you set out to define a deposit, the path constraints that are built into finding it and putting it into a mine are not variables, they're constants. We know when you set out to find phyllo at 5,000 feet that it's going to take 25, 30 years to put into production. You decided when you set out to find that deposit that it was going to take 20 odd years. So I've got no sympathy for you that it's going to take that long period of time. I've got these are strategic decisions that you have as options to choose to go around. They are not things that happen that are problems along the way.
The motivation for this conversation was a recent online interaction that I noticed between Steve Beresford and Scott North on a topic of declining exploration. Nothing better than echo chamber doom and gloom to attract a crowd, right? But no, not really. I soon find out that Steve and Scott know what they're talking about here. Steve has been in a role of chief geologist of 3 major mining companies with field experience in more than 60 countries, and he has his name on discoveries including Lion and Succoth Copper, so probably knows a thing or two about making discoveries. Of course, many of you will know him as co-host of the pioneering Exploration radio podcast, and if you haven't been living under a rock like I have, then you would have probably seen him recently on the Money of Mine podcast as well. Scott North is deep in exploration too, but not as a geologist, but from a strategy, investment and market analysis perspective. And as a prolific industry commentator, he does his research. One of his recent articles on the lithium industry was one of the most read articles of the last few months. So Steve and Scott tackle why, as an industry, we just suck at exploration. They talk about societal distractions and the psychological and behavioral root of the problem. Here's a trigger warning: money is not the problem, and actually wanting to find a deposit is. But yes, we do need to fix our perception problem. That old chestnut. They argue that to fix it, we must have some awkward conversations. So, listen to their thinking, be triggered, react and interact so that we can all find a better way into the future. And I'll bring you a conversation with Steve Beresford and Scott North.
I think a lot of the issues that we have with exploration are behavioural. They're not geological. And that doesn't go down well with scientists. And I don't care.
Well,
I'm going to speak my mind. I think there are issues of behavioural.
Well, that's
difference of opinion.
Let's start right there, right? Because I did invite John to this roundtable talk that we did, and we filmed that in Perth a few weeks ago. And I did push him onto this concept of framework of reference, right, where we talk about behavioural patterns more than we talk about, like you said, the science part, right? So. It's not that the SOPs are missing or that we suck at our jobs or, whatever version of that. It's just all behavioral, people-related stuff. I think I'm fairly firmly footed in that space as well, yeah. But I got some pushback from John at the time, so yeah.
Yeah, look, so he likes to, this is not offensive, but he likes to talk about behavioural, but in the end, and Scott, we'll be interested to get Scott's opinion. In the end, when you write, like I write some articles, I jump on LinkedIn every now and again so people know I'm still alive. When you write an article, everyone feels their own pain point and they go, yeah, it's all about raising finance. And I'm like, so why are the half of the emails I'm getting from majors? You people don't realise that the decline that we're facing is across the board. It isn't related to juniors, it's relating to majors. And then, so when you've got a big multifactorial problems like this, everyone notices their own pain point. Hey, I'm struggling. So I've got multiple companies. Some of them are struggling to raise money. Some of them are doing really, really well. And I've got other problems. The reality is, and I've been a chief geologist of many majors, you feel the problems that you notice, your own pain points. But if the problem is across the board, how can it possibly be finance? Finance is just one of the derivative problems down the line that you are feeling and really noticing.
Yeah.
But it's not the problem. It's just another question.
Yeah. Well, maybe Scott, sorry to lump you straight in cold right off the bat, but the challenge is made.
I think, especially in the junior or the mid-tier space, you hear a lot about finance and, we can't struggle, or there's, the declining amount of money going into early stage exploration, that type of stuff. I don't think it's a raising problem. I think there's plenty of money out there. I think it's a capital allocation problem. I think, if you look at the market right now, who's funding the junior side? It's retail, and retail want all these quick wins. Brokers are actually going to hate me for saying this, but do we need all these antimony plays? Do we need all these galleon plays? Probably not. But that's sucking the capital from the people that actually want to go look for the next actual copper play. So it's a frustrating thing, but as an industry, how do we fix that? It's not the company's problem per se, it's the people funding its problem. And they're the ones that are having the say of how you should run your business.
Well, I did a tiny bit of research, I guess, for this one, because this is not necessarily my field of expertise, but I want to be careful because I think a lot of commentators kind of regurgitate comments from other places. So sometimes when you read news on financing, I'm trying to think, is this person really coming up with their own research-based view, or is it just something that they've cobbled together from 5 other outlets on the same topic? But maybe what you're describing, so when I thought about this, and maybe mixing it with Steve's behavioral issue, is it just because we just suck at spending money wisely, right? Because if I'm a consumer and I run my home budget, I need to buy these 5 things to fix my home. This is the stuff that I need for my education. This is stuff that I need to plan for the long term. But you know what? Let's go out for dinner on Friday, even though we don't have any money, right? It's that kind of behavioral problem that we see in our industry as well. People don't invest because everybody knows we need this industry to fund the future growth of this and that and the net zero and all these things that we need to do. But hey man, here's Meta. Let's put some money into that because that's way more cool and interesting and gives me more returns on my investment. Isn't that just a fundamental fork in the road? And can we actually overcome that then if it is truly behavioral? So I'm just laying it all out on the table there. But yeah.
So my first thoughts here, and there's 2 pieces. I think the industry as a whole needs to represent itself better to the general public. I think there are good things out there, but how do you lift the perception of a dirty industry to the general public, and how do you then be valued the same way as a Meta and things like that as a consumer brand? And I think that all starts with how you're perceived in the public's eye. When you speak to the general public or friends that aren't involved in mining, they just think, oh, mining, it's dirty, it's disgusting. But when you actually say, well, we need mining, otherwise we can't consume without mining, people then start thinking about it. So I think it's a branding perception point of view in one respect, but in the other respect is, people's timeframes for these quick wins have always I feel, again, shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter because, everyone's day to day with social media, and it's just this dopamine fixes all the time. That leads into investing, and no one wants to wait around for 2 years for, some geologist to walk through the bush to find a rock chip, then to drill it. They want, oh, well, this one's got a nice project. I'll go to them, then I'll jump and I'll jump and I'll jump.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, Steve, maybe go to you on this one. I mean, it can't be just branding, because we've listened to this branding problem for at least a decade now, right? If not longer. We know that we suck at it. So, and the question is this, but what is the answer then? Can we actually lift ourselves out of the branding game, or are we just going to listen to that same old question? We suck at selling ourselves.
So look, I agree with your point, Scott, and some of us have been trying to work on that for a long period of time. I guess where I try and push these conversations is about solutions, given that we know that we've got problems. So we all know we've got a branding problem. The reason I wrote my last article was one of the things that I would accuse geologists of is just not standing up for themselves. So I see a lot of the investment community looking for exit points that are not discovery. I would argue that almost all majors and all juniors are, and I would use a very large number, greater than 90%, are therefore not involved in exploration, in what I would call exploration. So there's a big accusation. And the people who work for them, therefore, are also not working. Even if they are motivated correctly, they're not. So there's a large number of people that are distracted by exit points that have nothing to do with the primary goal, if we accept the axiom that the primary goal is to find mines. Now, so we aren't even addressing the brand ourselves as a derivative. So when we put all this together, you go, well, how do you fix that? And the answer, that is very, very, very complex. And that's why we have to have long form conversations, because the answer is there's 10 things, and it doesn't carry well through to LinkedIn. Here's 10 things that we need to fix about exploration and mining. The reality is, and the reason why I lean on behavior is because none of these things are intentional. There isn't anybody in any of those companies that's deliberately not exploring to not find mines. So I'm not accusing anybody of playing the game. I'm just saying it's unintentional. And you raised a great point, Scott, which was about distraction. So my philosophy on all this is we are getting more and more distracted as a society, and that, of course, is passing through to our own business. So every time you work with retail investors, their attention is on the next release, even if the next release would be detrimental to their longer term goals. That's how they behave.
Yep.
But we know that. We know that this is going on. So I'll give you another example. We know that the average timeline for commissioning a large copper mine is 23 years, or somewhere of that order. We could argue about the detail. I would argue that when you set out to find a deposit, the path constraints that are built into finding it and putting it into a mine are not variables, they're constants. We know when you set out to find Philo at 5,000 feet that it's going to take 25, 30 years to put into production. You decided when you set out to find that deposit that it was going to take 20 odd years. So I've got no sympathy for you that it's going to take that long period of time. I've got these are strategic decisions that you have as options to choose to go around. They are not things that happen that are problems along the way. So a lot of the complaining that we do, it's taking too long to do this. No. You decided to take too long to do this. Time is a strategic decision that you build in. If you want to work in country X, city X, or state X, and it's taking too long, why did you choose to do this? And the answer is, I don't think a lot of people are getting high enough level with their strategic options. And many ways I could
clarify that last bit?
So,
a lot of people.
So if I go higher level enough, if you wanted to find a large copper deposit and you choose to find a porphyry, then a porphyry is a low grade. It is inbuilt that it's going to take 20 years to put in production. So when you complain about the time it takes, or let's put something towards your work level, Rene, by the time you're seeing something, the length of time of studies and everything is hardwired in to the deposit style. Okay? That decision was made by the very first person who chose the project. And as a result, and this is something, that I rant on about, we don't make shoes in this business. We try and find mines. And the very first decision you make on the very first day is going to govern whether things are going to be successful or not. And there's nothing you can do along the way to make it more successful if it's already failed. So failure is built in from room one. It's a sequential process, and on day one, if you decide to have a bad project or a project with a long time frame, then it's already baked into the project. It's not like you can go, let's build a better team. If you build a better team on a failed project, it still fails.
The rocks are the rocks, right? The rocks don't change.
It's not about improving shoes. It's not like we can move the factory somewhere and we can make a better team. And often when a lot of geos get projects and they're handed them like this, and see if this relates to you too. You're given a project and you're told to run it. It's inbuilt in the way I just delivered it to you that you don't get a decision. I've just told you to run the project, as if the running of the project is a massive factor in changing the success of it. Now, of course, there are every single person along the way is adding value. My point is not that everybody doesn't add value and that everybody isn't trying to do anything. It's just if the project's going to fail or it's going to take 25 years, it is a constant that is built in right at the very first decision. And often now, it's even how the terminology we use. We go, here's a project or here's a property. It's even inbuilt into it that we're shopping around and exchanging something that we think is a little fixed box. Whereas the reality is that's just not how exploration works.
Sure. Well, I want to hear Scott's thoughts on this because you've certainly triggered a few things on my side to lean into. But Scott, why don't you go first?
Well, yeah, I think, I look at this stuff as a bit more of a commercial lens and a market-facing lens there. I think whoever's running the companies, they need to be probably more, they need to tell that story more and be more upfront about, yes, we did pick up a project that is going to take X, Y, Z years to be able to do the exploration and everything like that. So then the market isn't then disappointed. I think too many companies sometimes aren't upfront about those timelines and then are disappointed. And then that shapes of how people view the industry as, I lost money here or I didn't trust management there because they didn't say the right thing. So I think there probably needs to be a bit more transparency about known timeframes and known things like that. But, everything is pretty public these days and investors should be able to do the research themselves. So, yeah, I think going into projects, sometimes people do know a lot and it should be conveyed sometimes a little bit better.
Well, so I'm struggling with that concept, to be honest. I mean, we deal with uncertainty, right? So to use your shoe analogy, if I'm making a shoe, I know what a damn thing looks like when I draw it on a piece of paper, right? I mean, the problem here is that we think we see something, right? But we don't have this framework of knowledge that we know that this deposit has a reasonable chance of actually getting somewhere. So we have this very intricate process of whittling down something that could be, that also actually depends on the time of almost the month of the year in terms of the cycle of the industry and whether you're in lithium or rare earth and whatnot. So you're sitting on this very leaky boat on a stormy ocean, trying to work out with your team, and let's talk about teams and skills later, but you're doing the best that you can with the options that you've been given. And because it's like a chicken and the egg problem, right? If you would actually have backers like, I saw the Cobalt news again with some further money or some American commitment, it's like, well, that's great, man. But, I run a little junior as well. We just got 400 grand. Great, we've got 400 grand. Shit, what do? Well, we'd love to drill 100,000 holes in the thing, but that's not going to work. Isn't there just a good dose of pragmatism that we just need to apply here? I mean, I get it. We want to, we don't want to commit to failed projects. And there's certainly something about wishful thinking and cognitive biases here, right? Absolutely. But and I'm not trying to defend a position at all because I'm actually in agreement with what you said before, Steve. But we do have to kind of put it in context a little bit, right?
Yeah. So let's unpack that a little bit because I know that statement. There's a tendency to feel a little bit offended by that statement because everybody's like, but so let's direct it back at you. This is not offensive about your end of the exploration value curve at all. This is just a simple statement that the majority of projects are already baked in to fail, and we actually already know that. We know that before we start. I can look around the market and tell you immediately which ones are going to fail. Now, there's a whole bunch of projects in between that need every step to go right of the discovery process and the resource delineation. And of course, there's many, many factors that fail in those projects going forward. So I'm definitely not decrying the concept that this is all about mitigating uncertainty. Absolutely. But the starting point, and it actually leads into what Scott said, which is that do we have enough money in this business? And the answer is we do. We just have too many poor projects that can't work.
Yeah.
And if we could somehow improve that decision making, then we could all get back to doing what we know is important, which is at every stage of the process, and we'll get into this when we talk about teams, everybody's got to deliver at what they do. But what's going on early is because the decisions here are not, I don't think either majors or juniors are trying to find mines. I really don't think that many of them are. And I think people know that that's the case for a certain number of juniors, but I don't think that the majority are. And that's probably where the contentious element comes in, is if we could tidy up that problem, then every step of the process that's required. So the marketing person that's required still has to do their maximum job. Every step of the discovery, mining value chain has to work. So I'm definitely not insulting anyone, other than right back at the very beginning, if you choose a project that has nothing there is nothing you can do. And that is baked in. That is a genuine constraint. Now, where we might get contentious is, and this would be interesting if we had John on the project, is do you know that early on or not? And I think people think that that's not true, that you don't. And that is something I'm willing to argue about for a long period of time. So...
Well, no, I like that. I joked to somebody else on the email this morning, a client, I think, has said, I'm a very disagreeable person, right? And it always brings very interesting conversations. So, and I not at the slightest offended. It takes something to offend a Dutch person, I would say. But I certainly want to keep poking at that, because you kind of almost sketch a binary playing field for us here, right? And like you just finished yourself, that's not the case. And the problem is indeed, and this is what I put to John as well a few weeks ago in the other conversation, and again, it comes back down to behavioral patterns, right? And we don't, our industry professionals, let's just say our experts, right? They don't have a framework of reference, perhaps other than a few of us, right? I mean, John has got his name on a few things, so he can very easily claim the title of, hey man, I know what I'm talking about because I've found a few of these. But how many people do you know that have found, 24 deposits and therefore can claim some reasonable framework of reference to looking at a project and seeing that shit? If you just look at the market and the many thousands projects and people running those projects, by simple deduction, you can work out that, just to use your number, 90+% of those people have zero framework of reference because they've never found a deposit. So, and I think that's a very powerful argument to say, yeah, look, you might be right, but there are just not enough success stories for people to have any feedback loop on. So it's therefore you're full with hopefuls. You know that you go to the casino, statistically, you're going to walk out of there a poorer man, right? It's that kind of behavioral problem again. So I'm not sure if I'm either sort of leaning left or right on this, but I think...
So to keep going on that then, so I don't want to imply that you can know enough at a project that you don't have to go through all the steps. But you do know. Let's go through this. You'll find I'm very much aligned with John on this way of thinking. If we wanted to look for world-class systems that truly make a lot of money, do they have characteristics or not have characteristics that are identifiable early on? And the answer is definitely. So a lot of people, though, would say they're not looking for those deposits. So this boils down to a question that I think that Scott identified early, which is a lot of people are not here to discover mines. But it doesn't mean they aren't trying to extract value. They are very so.
Very different things.
All of the industry is trying to extract value. It's just looking for different exit points. So let's put this back to Scott maybe. If you invest in something, are you looking for a 3x return and an exit early, or you're looking for 100x? And if we ask that question and framed it like that, you'll get very different answers.
Yeah, I think, if you start an exploration company, if you're true to exploration, your North Star should always be, we're turning it to a mine. We're going out to discover a mine, right? So but as you said, I reckon 90% of people, that's not that's not their North Star. And there's I've heard it quite a few times over the last couple of weeks. They're not looking to build a mine, they're looking to mine the market. And I'm sure everyone's heard that terminology. So I guess the 100x or the 3x, everyone, I would say most people would say the 100x, but the 100x is, you're looking for something completely different, I think, because in reality, how long did it take to find philo, right? That's a 20-year journey, and most people aren't prepared to wait 20 years to go through those ups and downs. So I think most people would like the 100x and probably can get the 100x on things that will never, ever, ever become mines. So that's kind of where the value is there.
I don't know, man. I'm going to play devil's advocate here because, we did some work for WA1, and I think one of you just referenced, the niobium. I think it was you, Scott, on some post as well. And, so I know the deposit well. And, Jesus, you found one of those. Yeah, of course, let's go and mine this, right? Because there's clearly a tremendous project there, right? Happy days. Where do I sign? An easy decision. But, I have no problem, I think, as I'm trying to listen to both of you arguing here, that if you are a junior and you find something enough to make it exciting enough for somebody else to come in with a bigger arsenal and bigger groups who have a de-risking policy, right? Because this is an ecosystem of de-risking that we all play part of. And, yes, I am probably a principalist that wants to find an ore body as a geologist. Which geologist doesn't want to find a mine, right? But I certainly, think there has to be a certain pragmatism that at some point, the area that you picked that you don't have the money to really do all the justice to, because you'd love to do geophysics over the entire thing and, do all this multi-element geochem and do all this blah, blah, blah. But at some point you got to go, okay, the tenement fees are up, guys. What shall we do? Well, we got to drop some ground. Well, you know what? This group wants to come in for 50%, do a JV, spend a bit of money here. Isn't that just the ecosystem that works for that reason? If we would all be funded and we'd all have discoveries on our resume, then yes, we would, and we all have the time in the world to go and explore these things in a market that is stable enough for us to do so, then yes. But I can't see that. And again, not to just pick an obtuse sort of angle to this for the sake of the argument, but there has to be some pragmatism to this, where you can just allow that process to run its course, and the ecosystem kind of is what it is because of that exact problem.
I think there's two things we can take on that. One is, so if I understand you correctly, and Scott, I think we just should accept that this is the pragmatic reality of the way this industry works. And so me personally, I make these comments, I write these articles, etc. But me personally, I've taken a belief system from Mark Bennett, who pretty much squarely told me on podcast one day, which is to look after myself more. So
I was going to make exactly the same point. Yes, please go.
My logic is, I think I know, so let's qualify that. I think I know what I'm doing, and I have chosen to look for something. So to answer one of your questions, Scott, about time frame, the reason I don't think it takes 10 years to find these deposits. I also don't think it takes 20 years to put them in production. I think that's a decision that somebody's made in the deposit style they chose. It's baked into the geology. So if you want to find what WA1 is, it's courage, man. And it's a word that just doesn't appear anymore. People, it's too emotive and perhaps it's too fluffy. Bravery, courage. But if you want to set out to find that, so there's a couple of things I've learned. I have the fortune at the moment to be backed by Robert Friedland, and I love to look at people like Robert and go, why are you the most successful discoverer of the last 20 years?
Yeah.
And why are big corporations struggling, or why are juniors struggling? And the answer is, you could look at it and go, well, he's got money. You could also look at it and go, well, he drills holes. Those are facts. I would argue they're derivative down the track. He backs the right people. What does that mean? He backs people who are explorers, i.e. people not trying to exit. So my philosophy is very much listening to Mark Bennett, which is like, find people who are aligned that are also looking to find a mine, because otherwise you're working with people who are just exiting, and they are not actually aligned with what you think you're doing. And so when I'm critical of saying most people are involved in exploration, I mean that. But the answer to solve that problem is find a way to solve that equation, because someone like Robert isn't working with people. Nobody's backing him. None of his investors are looking for small exits. Everybody is aligned. Likewise, if you're working with majors, it should be that they're also looking for large exit points. So one of the things that I would critique very strongly is I think people think looking for big deposits is harder than small deposits. And I very much disagree with that. It is a lot easier to look for a big deposit than a little deposit. It's a lot lower probability of finding it, but it's a lot easier to look for it. And I would argue you can just look around the market. Most people are not looking for a deposit that will, let's make this national and political. The critical metals thing. Most people are not looking to have any involvement with the future of Australia and its critical metals. That's not what the majority are doing. Does the government know that? Does individuals know that? I think everybody knows this. The question really is, how do you solve this problem? Me personally, I solve this problem by doing things my way with people who I think are aligned with my values and aligned financially with my values. I don't know any other way to do it. I don't think it's possible to convince people on a podcast, other than maybe people will listen and go, I never thought of that before. But the majority, I think we already know all these things. We're talking to ourselves. The reality is some people are brave enough to go and follow their own path.
Yeah, I think you might be surprised in that last one. I think there are people out there that when I see comments, right, I always joke, it's the YouTube comment section where you learn the most, right? So it's actually, so I always enjoy when I read, comments on whatever it is, the Money and Mind podcast or the one that you're involved with and so on. And I think people are looking for guidance, as we all know, in this deinstitutionalized world that I speak about, every now and then. We don't get this knowledge from universities and newspapers anymore. We get it from people like yourselves, sitting in these calls or talks and actually sharing what works for them, so that some people out there actually think, hey, this could be interesting. I should let myself be swayed a little bit by this. But Scott, he's veering into your space here on the comments that you've been making about critical minerals and the political system and the geopolitics and so on. What do you? Let's just go there for just 3 seconds, shall we?
Well, I think Western governments need to basically stop thinking in political cycles, and this is why China basically wins at this every single day of the week. If you look at Western governments, they all basically think in political cycles, and that's a 3 to 4 year time frame. And you look at China and why they're winning at most things, critical minerals, supply chain, processing, they're thinking in these 20-year cycles. So how do we, maybe as Australia, compete with that? Kwinana is the perfect example there. I'm pretty sure that still isn't at nameplate capacity. And why is that? It's probably skill set plus other things. How do you build up a skill set to be able to run a processing facility like that? That takes time. And I read something last week that, China is actually stopping or taking away passports of the people that can build these processing facilities. So how do we actually do this? I don't know, but it's not going to happen in a 3 to 4 year time frame. So, and the other piece here is, the government announced their critical mineral stockpiles, blah, blah, blah. But it's one thing to dig it up and put it on the side of the road, but who's going to then process it? Well, it's going to China. So I think it's we're 20 years behind. How do we speed up that process? How do we onshore? How do we do all these things? And it just shows how important mining is to the world. So yeah.
But if I listen to that, right, because I can't help but feel that we're coming to, a rather philosophical fork in a road, right? Because we're literally advocating for communism here, right? I mean, because the problem is that indeed they have a they have a long-term view of things, and in our current sort of capitalism 2.1 format, we the reason why Steve describes a system that works for him is because that's what the capitalist structure has demanded from us in these 3-year cycles, and this machine that we've built can only work that way. You mentioned the word courage, and that's great. Courage is great if you got bags load of money, right? Let me be courageous, man, hold my beer. But if you are a bottom dweller in a capitalist society where you have to move up the food chain, and then you have to take these risks. Robert didn't get rich by not taking a punt somewhere on something, right? Come on, multiple things, right? And he's gotten lucky in some places, but in other places he's obviously made very smart decisions. And then the moment you make money and then get the right people around you, everything just becomes easy. Formula, copy paste, do it again and again, right? But and again, it is not to I can try to weave these 2 points together here about this geopolitical situation that we're in, because I can't see the current shit show that we're in as a society in this, particularly in the Western world around politics, providing any sound base for proper development of your mining infrastructure, right? And that's, let's not go immediately to America and what's going on there, but you almost want some weird asshole to come in at the highest political level, wink, wink, to break everything at its core and build it up again, right? Because the Chinese are just going to walk away from this, clearly, with this long-term view. Sorry, again, it's a deep topic here, but I feel the two are related.
If you keep going on that one, I would say it's not communism, it's autocracy. So the bottom line is, and again, lift the level up a little bit, the problem isn't mining, the problem is everything. I don't know if you've noticed, but the West can't build anything. So, and we're getting beaten on everything. So that sounds, the first reaction to this, and we live in a world like this, will everyone go, oh, you just advocated for communism, or you advocated for autocracy? No, I didn't. What I said is there's clearly an issue with the more processes you build in, the more you systematize everything, and the more decision makers that you get, that we are slowing everything down. And an autocracy speeds things up, and it also has a longer time frame, or can choose to. In the communism case, they had the longer time frame, but in an autocratic environment, the US more like environment now, they can make sharper decisions. Even let's go to Robert Friedland. He can make sharper decisions. I work for First Quantum. One of the greatest people I've ever worked with is Philip Pascal. And we had what was called a spoken wheel model, which is everything is made decision by him. There's no hierarchy. I guess the answer from all this is the first step is to recognize when we talk about these macroeconomic issues at the mining level, they're macroeconomic on the full political level. They're bigger issues than we've got. And again, I'm going to recognize my own privilege here. I'm 55 years old. And the reason why I'm courageous now is because I'm 55 years old, not because I'm 25 years old. And I tell everybody, be careful about listening to what I do, because I'm doing this because I'm in a different financial state to you. So be very careful. You might not be as privileged as I have been. But anyway, to answer this question is to solve the equation that all Western democracies, capitalist societies, are getting finding harder and harder to do bigger projects. I'm not advocating that we change that, but we do have to be honest about that starting point.
Yeah. Yeah, Steve, I'll just go to Scott here because he put out a post, maybe even today, he talks about Generation Z is not keen to get into mining, and I saw that post and I thought, well, that's part of the problem as well, and perhaps with all the distractions, people are indeed not very courageous anymore. Where do you weave the whole skill shortage into this as well? Because that's part of the problem, right? Because if good skilled people don't come into the industry, then we don't get good decisions down the road on these projects, which seems to be a logical connection here.
I think, someone actually made a good comment on that post about, everyone's distracted by TikTok and they want to be, the next Kardashian or something like that. So how do we kind of get on those levels to be able to communicate what the industry is to those people? So going back to the communication piece, I know it's been a problem for a while, but we kind of need to maybe take things from the other industries to see how they're doing it well and how that can be weaved into mining. I made a joke, maybe I need to make my own TikTok account and make mining cool or something like that. But I think, I live in Wollongong and I understand the university courses for geo down here are shutting down or have shut down. So is it a no one is interested thing, or is it they can't get a job thing? I think as a whole, society once again views mining not as a sexy, nice place to be. They view it as a dirty place to be. So we need to, I think, and I said in the post, get into schools and educate people on how important mining is, because without mining, we literally need to stop consuming. So there needs to be that fundamental teaching of how important it is to society.
Yeah, and there are a lot of discussions in this space happening for many years now, and it's I don't think I've seen anyone coming up with the solution. I mean, it is indeed branding, and we need to be advocates and all those things. But if you've listened to the channel for a while, and for those who have, I mean, I genuinely believe that you can't really influence that. You can only send so many woolen-socked geologists into primary schools, right? That's not where and all respect to those who do. And if you float around on LinkedIn, there are people who have devoted their careers to exactly this problem, which Hayden Mort with Geologize is always a good example. Who spends their entire life trying to break this, or entire career trying to break this mold. So, but to me, it gels with what we're discussing before, right? Like you were saying, Steve, it's easy to be courageous if you're a bit older, you got some money in the bank, and your kids have left home. But if you're still paying a mortgage that is so high that you can hardly afford a second child, then good luck being courageous. So. I kind of tie everything in a sort of nihilistic way back to society and where we are at the moment, just in that cycle, right? And everything else kind of flows from that. So it's easy to sit outside and judge it, but practically on the ground, if you're on the boat, on one of the sort of safety boats off the Titanic, yes, you can tell everybody to swim harder, but it's difficult to do because, I mean, again, we talk about the problems, but the actual solution mode is forever sort of out of our reach here a little bit, other than indeed turn communist.
I agree, and because it's multifactorial, it's very hard to fix a complex beast. But what I guess, listening to you, I just thought of something which is, I do advise, I've had many mentees in this world, and I always tell them, they're like, how do I solve this problem? And you're like, well, it doesn't sound like it's solvable at the political level. I mean, one of the things that I always tell people, I'm not quite sure why everyone's so fixated on macroeconomics. Mm-hmm. It's the one thing you can't change as an individual. Now, you could I really admire people like Hayden and Jessica and the number of people who are out there trying to do this. I strongly support them. Let's give them a massive tick and all the support in the world. Anybody who's out there trying to change viewpoints, that's really, really important. And I don't want to sound selfish, but one of the things that we do need to do is say, well, how do I solve these equations? I can solve this as an individual. So you could say something like, well, I don't have the money like Friedland has, but actually everybody can live by their own values. So that's why I wrote the piece in Coring on the romance of exploration. That is not a message directed to everyone. There's a message for people like me. That's all I'm looking for. It's not the solution, it's a solution. But what is Robert looking for? What does Mark Creasy look for? What are these people trying to do? They're looking for people who care. They're looking for people that are intrinsically motivated. And some of these people who are intrinsically motivated, have mortgages, and they're early in their career and they're struggling, or whatever the scenario happens to be. This industry is brutal to everyone throughout the whole career. So what can you do? No matter what you do, you can continue to be correct by your own values and chase and be motivated by the chase and the thrill of looking for something. Is that going to work out for you 24/7? No, it's not. I mean, the fact is I've been a chief geologist of 3 majors and none of them worked out. Okay? And that's the reality of the world. And everyone's like, so even when you're very senior, you can't solve these problems. But I continue to live by my own values from day one, which is and this is a philosophical word, I make this big difference between aspiration and ambition. Ambition is I would like to be chief geologist, or I'd like to be rich. In fact, aspiration is I would like to find a world-class deposit. And you know what? Chances are I, as a result of that, will become, let's call it famous, seems a strange word, but you will become notable or you will get the rewards. It's the other way around. You need to aspire to something and then you get the result, rather than the world at the moment is looking for the result. And it's looking for the quickest and cheapest way to get the result. But in fact, if your job, so people say to me, you know, I only look for Super Jones at the moment. And they'll go, but you probably won't be successful. I know that. I'm well aware that is an aspirational goal that may not be solved in my lifetime. But I am doing something about it. I am aspiring to reach that goal, and I can't say that about everyone. So one of the advices I provide to anybody of any age, so if you're working for someone and your job is logging chips and you want to find a world-class ore body, well, you might be looking for a job, and I have no criticism of anybody who's just doing this as a job and not motivated by a career. No criticism at all. But for those who want to do this, it is options available to you every day to aspire to be better at your job, to get yourself into a position that takes a lifetime to find and satisfy your values. But every day you will go forward and you will go backwards. You will lose your job, you'll work for the wrong people. But you know what? I mean, I'm back to the Friedland point again. It is not about what company you work for. It's about who you work for, and you can keep improving that every single day.
Scott, are you inspired?
Yeah, this thing is probably going to go live whenever it does. But I've recently left my role because of in changes and going out on creating something myself because of opportunities that have been presented to myself in the last 6 months. So really, I'm 35. I've got a young family. I've got a mortgage, but I think the world is your oyster, and you really need to go after it and create your own luck in this industry. And work with the people that you want to work with. So, everything that you just said, Steve, is like I'm thinking, oh, I'm doing that right now. I'm in that position. So it really resonates with me.
I find it really, really interesting to listen to, Steve, because one thing that in a short time that I've been on this planet, which is only 47 years, so I float somewhere there, is that, I mean, take the AusAMM as an example, right? There's, 15,000 members, and we sit around every year with a group of 100 people wondering why the other 14,900 are just not energetically out there storming the world and leading technical conversations, barging into in schools to sell the geology dream. The people that I interview on this channel as well, they clearly got an X factor somewhere that leads them to do exactly what they've done, right? There is a special source there that people have. And yeah, sure, you still need a good amount of dose of luck, and even smart people make shit decisions, as I keep saying. So, you do have to make good decisions to work with the right people and get somewhere, and then everything else becomes easier. But it is so easy to say, follow your dreams and work hard and, be inspired. But, I've noticed as well, some people, probably not some, the majority of people, even though they are passionate geologists, and when you talk about geology, they'll talk about minerals and rocks and fossils and bricking dinosaurs all day long. But it doesn't really mean that they are going to be those people who are just, the Musks of the world and say, fuck, let's fly to Mars and I'm going to make it so, right? And that's what we're talking about here. And those are the kind of people that you need to tackle extremely difficult projects of going into very challenging jurisdictions and find a deposit, spend money that is not yours with all repercussions due. I mean, it's that's not for everyone, and that's that X factor. And I think you said it well, because I'm not saying that you said that. You actually said it very nicely, Steve. It is not for everyone, but I do think that people listening to these kind of conversations, there will be some who will just sit on the edge of some inspiration that they've just been looking for, and they go, fuck it, let's go into this, let's change roles and chase that thing, and then that's another better one.
So just to riff on that, it doesn't have to be changing your whole life. That isn't feasible.
True.
When you're 35 years old and you've got a family necessarily. That not everybody can do that. I'm well and truly, I've been through the phase of children. This industry is horrible at times. It really, really is nasty. I wouldn't advise anybody, my children, to work in it for that result. But, I've got the bug. But one of the things I would comment on your point, you talk about people who are inspired to do this. One of the things that I look back to, and you're in my home country right now.
I know.
One of the things that's really important to me is, I think, this is my belief system. I don't know if I'm right. I've definitely been yelled at for this viewpoint. I think everybody can be inspired. Some people just haven't met the people that inspire them or the things that inspire them. And the example I would use comes from where you are right now. It depends. Can you remember a university lecturer who was as boring as batshit? And they taught a science that you never got, and you don't have that skill right now because you weren't motivated. And I've got one of those, and I think everybody has met something who just by accident you haven't been inspired in a direction because the person who taught you when you were this age, or the people you've worked with, or whatever it is, haven't been aligned. So you don't know. Say you're one of these people. I once gave this talk on recruiting people with the right stuff. And I got torn apart by a group of 21-year-olds afterwards who just sort of mobbed me. And they were like, man, you've forgotten what it's like to be 21. And I'm like, yeah, I have forgotten what it's like to be 21. It's true. But I also am not necessarily speaking to everybody on this call. I'm just pointing out that there are people out there who just haven't had the luck of the draw. So I'll give you a real factual example. One of my best friends and I came over from New Zealand to Perth, or came to Australia, and he ended up working for a Kalgoorlie junior, sitting on a rig, bored, and left the industry within a year. And I'm still here 30 years later. I work for Western Mining, and it's not an accident. It's not an indication of the two individuals. It's just a little bit of the luck of the draw of who you work with and when you work with it.
Absolutely.
And one of the pieces of advice I have is yeah, I've forgotten what it's like to be 21, but at some stage, if you want a career, you not necessarily have to be Elon Musk, or you don't have to be as ambitious or aspirational as I am. That's not a requirement. But if you like geology, and I see these people out there who are working 12-hour shifts and they're just bored.
Yeah.
They're in the wrong place for their level of motivation. And partly it's because they're unaware that there are people out there who really want to explore. So again, I'll use a factual story about a friend, a colleague, a British girl who left, who just really wanted adventure. And she wanted to be a proper explorer. And she just left the UK and went to Mauritania as a British female, and which is incredible. Just an incredible story. Those options are available to everybody. Everybody has that those options to be that courageous and that brave. And I realize it doesn't fit into everybody's life. I absolutely understand that. But those options are available to anyone to take on the unknown, including in Australia. Like a lot of people go, oh, look, you've got this wanderlust to want to see the world. I'm like, yeah, I'm motivated by geology because I love standing somewhere.
Yeah.
One of my favorite individuals is with Mark Bennett in Victoria at the moment, a guy called Doug Windsor, and they've just made a nice little discovery. And he's just the guy who wants to be in the bush. He will constantly want to be in the middle of nowhere doing stuff. That kind of level of motivation is what finds all bodies.
Yeah.
And you don't need to have RAS, you don't need to have degrees. You just need to find people who just want to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's that's so true. They got nothing to bring there other than agreement. But I want to just jump to Scott, because as I was listening to you there, and the amount of different things that you're picking up, Scott, is that this sort of exploration of just that you're just, I mean, because you're all over the place with commentary and topics that, there's some research there. So are you getting paid for all of this stuff, mate? Or is it just indeed, are you inspired to just indeed jump in the world of mining and just figure out all these super complex topics?
It has been my passion, my hobby probably for the past 15 years. So I've constantly reading, constantly trying to understand the industry, and constantly trying to work out how to better myself at it, and then better us as an industry. And I, 6 months ago at the start of the year, I thought, well, I'm reading the stuff anyway. Why don't I just put stuff out on LinkedIn and start a conversation? And it's literally blown up from that, because I think, it's about being consistent, sharing your thoughts out there. And some people hate what I have to say and some people love what I have to say. But I think if you're not always trying to understand the next topic, you'll just get left behind. So that's what I try and do every day. I have news sources that I read, and I just try to basically share what I think. And there are certain things that I get a lot more passionate about. Exploration is definitely one of those things. I can really resonate with Steve saying, I would love to be part of a discovery somehow, and I'd love to, surround myself with the right people. I think I'm very on board with that. Everyone has the opportunity to go out there and be part of teams that resonate with where they want to be in life, and then in a job wise. People just get lazy, people just get complacent. But everyone has that opportunity, I think. So I think by doing what I'm trying to do now and share my thoughts, and then also it gets others talking, and you can read some of my comments. Like I remember seeing the other day, some guy had a rare earths plant that he's trying to build in the US, and then another person was like, well, I've got some feedstock, and they've just created a conversation from that too. Nice. So I think it's all about just trying to start those conversations. And
So is that like the angle? Because I was with analysts, if I just use that term broadly, I always feel, what is it? Well, maybe I'll change the question. I mean, what are you seeing out there? What makes a person a good analyst, and what do you think is the trick to write engaging commentary that is new and adds value and isn't just, that regurgitating thing that I talked about before? Because when I read what you put out, it grabs me more than other stuff out there. And it's probably, for me, it's because it looks well researched. I mean, I can't say I've spent, 10 hours reading every single post, but what's the kind of point of difference that you're trying to put onto it compared to others?
I guess, I'm always, it's whatever's the latest in the news or the latest data point or something like that. So it's new. So someone hasn't seen that before, or, it's fairly, maybe they've seen one or two takes, but then also it's so important, I think, to share my view. Everyone will just copy and paste a headline or a paragraph from a news article and put it on there. But I think what resonates with people is me sharing my view. And once again, they might hate what I have to say, they might love what I have to say, but and people get aggressive sometimes, but it's all about sharing your view.
Give me an example of being aggressive, because I've just been unfriended by somebody simply because I didn't agree with something. So it's there's people out there that just I don't believe in mining at all. So right, yeah, sure, yeah.
But yeah, I think just sharing my point of view is the thing that gets across to most people, and then that starts a conversation. So and then once again, I'll share my view a lot more on things that I'm more passionate about, exploration. But then other things that, there's so much stuff that always happening in the world. You can't comment on it all. But I think just picking the topics I know that I'm passionate about, it just has literally turned out to be, well, there are tens of thousands of people out there on LinkedIn sharing those same views, which is kind of feels good, I guess.
Well, people talk about LinkedIn as being an echo chamber, right? And it is. We do have a lot, particularly in the mining space. You're talking to, converted, a bunch of people that already share very, very similar ideas, and it's getting outside that bubble.
Exactly.
Where we can get some traction. And for that to happen, we need to get onto the Twitters and the TikToks and all that sort of stuff. But it's,
Steve, we might need to make you a TikTok account to start channeling the young kids.
Yeah, just have to.
You know what? LinkedIn is the only thing Australians really use in the mining sector. Obviously, in America, as you know, Twitter is a lot bigger than LinkedIn, and so that's always confuses North American people as to why we're on LinkedIn. It's because Australians don't use Twitter to the same degree. Look, one of the things I know, just want to add that to Scott, is I've only met you once, but I feel like I've met you many times, and that's because of the LinkedIn thing. So maybe there's something that Rene's getting there, that giving your own personal viewpoints really does matter. It just creates a personality rather than a news feed, because we're swamped with newsfeed. We really are swamped with data at the moment. What we're not getting is curation, and curation only comes from a personal choice. Who do I listen to and who do I not listen to? And we all make those decisions constantly. Can't listen to everything.
Yeah, 100%. I agree, mate. I'm on Twitter also, so I 100% agree. You see both sides. I think the personal attacks on Twitter are a lot more because people just hide behind an alias there. So,
that's right. At least my Twitter handle is my same name, so at least I can't get away from that. But
no.
But it is, and maybe just to try and wrap it up here a bit, but and we touched on it before briefly, but what I quite enjoy about the platforms, whatever it really is not the actual post, it's the interaction to the post, right?
Exactly.
And because sometimes there's things that you don't really know or fully understand, and then you read somebody who you've also read comments from, and you kind of follow them, and because they say sensible things and they say something that makes you think, oh, that's a good point. Let's see how they respond to that. That ecosystem to me is what makes the new world order in terms of information sharing, right? I don't have an Elsevier account anymore, right? I go to ResearchGate and I just read the comments to the papers and the feedback on the papers. And if you are sort of trained scientifically enough to weigh up, left versus right, then you make a pretty damn good judgment, I'd say, on balance on most of the things you read out there. So, and that's obviously how this conversation started as well, because I follow both of your musings and I think this stuff makes sense and there's interesting feedback coming from it. So yeah, I mean, I do really appreciate your contributions to let's just use the word again, to this world, this ecosystem, and hopefully we can all make the world a slightly better place and find some damn ore bodies. Yeah. Anyway, well, shall we leave it there, folks? Because I think I can easily dance in another 5 directions, but we've gone well over an hour here, and I think it's probably late in the day to broach another subject here. But perhaps we can repeat the exercise in the future sometime. Pick some other lateral aspects of the industry and have some running commentary. I'm sure Scott, you're getting inundated at the moment. I saw you've joined forces with another group. Steve, I'm pretty sure you've got a full dance guide as well. But if you
the fullest,
well, again,
I spend my life trying to just get rid of stuff. I've never been good with the word no, and no is becoming part of being distracted. I get distracted by shiny things. Oh, that's shiny, and it's like is just not doing everything. It's a really difficult thing to do because that means there's a lot of good things to do still, but that I can't do.
I don't read a lot of books on business and self-improvement, but you see these top 10 lists sometimes floating around on the internet of what highly successful people do, the top 10 things. And I go, oh yeah, I do that and I do that. And oh yeah, I kind of do that, but maybe I should do better. And there's always the one that I don't do is saying no, because apparently that's what highly successful people do. So, but I don't say no, I say yes to everything.
I actually think we're all distracted, and that's the big problem. The distraction thing is huge, and everyone implies, "Oh, are you implying that I don't have any ability to manage this?" Yeah, I am. We all are, and it's not our fault in some cases. It's going on with our children. It's across the board, and so I like the word that I used before, which was curation. So, I'm still an academic temporarily for at least the next 5 minutes before I pull out of that. But you can't do everything, so you have to curate what you choose to do. And if you don't think you need to curate, then you are distracted. You are completely at the realm. There is too many things. You can go down a deposit scale too much. You could be distracted by macro. I think everyone's distracted by macroeconomics. So here's my controversial point. I don't even know why anybody uses macroeconomics to make a decision investment. It's the one thing that's not in your control. What's in your control is the company that you're going to work with and the quality of the people and the quality of the project. Even the project I don't think is as important as the quality of the people. The one thing that's not in control, and I'm sure you disagree with me, Scott, but is macroeconomics. So everyone goes, I want to be, so I'll use an example. Everyone goes, you don't want to be a nickel at the moment. I'm like, really? Why? Nickel's really bad. As opposed to all the deposits that I look for are only in the upper quartile that only make money. And you tell me what I do is bad. Yep. You are only listening to macroeconomics, which implies to me that you're not interested in making a discovery. You're only interested in the day-to-day variation in a metal price or the longer-term forecast. The one thing that we absolutely can't do is forecast metals. We're terrible at it. Absolutely shocking at it.
I was just going to ask you for a forecast for the gold price, Steve, but no, you can't do that anymore.
So I do understand why people do it, but it's the one thing that I think is unimportant.
Yeah, but we love it, speculation, it's just, it's a human trait, but no, 100% agree. Scott, any final words of wisdom from your side?
No, look, I actually agree with you, Steve. I think, people should understand maybe the macro environment, but not use it as a, long-term investment tool, because, all we need is Trump to pull out something else and gold spikes or gold drops. No one actually knows what's around the corner, and no one's got a crystal ball. So, yeah.
For good stuff, guys. Well, thanks again so much for coming on to the show, and let's do this again in a few months and see if all these aspirational statements and macroeconomics have changed, but chances are they don't. So the lesson is create your own microclimate and be successful in that. Good stuff. Thanks, guys.
I like the way you phrase that.
Thank you.
Let's finish on that. All right, thanks so much, guys.